Hey, I've just been having a conversation with my friend about crime levels in British cities and sort of cities that have certain reputations for high crime and just generally the subject of crime in British urban areas. Um, Coincidentally, I've just come across a story on Yahoo News about double stabbing in central Birmingham, fatal stabbing. Two men in their 40s have been stabbed. Um, Firstly, that's my thoughts go out to their families. That's I can't imagine what they're going through at this moment. To lose someone through murder is must be an incredibly painful experience. So I want to be sensitive to that. But there's something I'd just like to respond to on a lot of the comments under the Yahoo News feed. Under the report. People were coming out with things like, oh, the UK is out of control. What's happening to this country? This is terrible. Um, I'm moving country, etc. And I'd just like to speak a bit in this video about how emotions, emotional reactions to stories correlate with the actual reality of the situation. What I'm trying to say is that I believe people see depressing stories like this and they respond emotionally and not rationally. So, for instance, these two guys have been stabbed to death. So people are now assuming Birmingham's a really dangerous city, and it actually really isn't. Of course, that's no comfort to the families of these men. But I'd just like to make a point. You know, I'm not living in an ivory tower. I spent 2 years living in a very rough housing estate, surrounded by gangs. My family were plagued by gangs, and we had to move house. So I'm not. It's not like I'm sort of sitting in some leafy suburb and have never experienced crime. That is not the situation. I've experienced crime and I've experienced the emotions that go with it. And my views on crime are pretty hard line. But with that conservative with a small c views on crime, I also believe in responsible reporting. And the tabloids certainly have been extremely irresponsible and they haven't shown the whole picture. You know, when tragedies occur, concerning crime, it sells newspapers to plaster that all over the front page. And therefore, people naively believe that is the sort of situation as a whole. And yet it's not. Now, if you look at London, we had a period a while back, I think it was around 2008 it peaked, where there was a lot of youth murders with knives. And that was a terrible thing, and it was really being scrutinised at the time. Um, since then, knife crime in London has significantly fallen. Certainly, the rate of knife homicides has significantly fallen. So why do we not hear this being reported by the tabloids? Um, I believe in 2008, don't quote me word for word on this, but I believe 35 young people were stabbed to death that year, which was a depressing statistic. I believe last year it was less than 10. That's still too many. It's still no consolation to the families. But I do believe in putting crime into context. I do believe that when violent crime falls, that has to be welcomed. And it does irritate me when people say things like these sort of blunt statements like, this country's terrible, what's this country coming to? These sort of void, empty statements that don't really mean anything because they're responding emotionally. It's like saying the sky is blue. Saying crime is bad is just a fact. But what isn't a fact and what they think is a fact is that this country is very violent, and it really, really isn't. The chances of being murdered in Britain are very, very low. To put things in context, we have about 1,200 homicides a year, roughly. We have a population of 63 million. Now, if you do the maths in that, you'll find that we actually have a pretty low homicide rate. And no amount of tabloid sensationalism changes that fact. If you compare the UK to a country like Honduras, which I understand is the murder capital of the world, then you will see things in context. Now, please don't misunderstand this video and think I'm being insensitive to victims of crime. If you've been a victim of crime, you have my utmost sympathy. Because I've been there. I know that mental anguish, the stress and anxiety that brings, I really, really do. But we cannot allow emotions to dictate judgment and to dictate, to distort and blind us from the actual situation. Now, I am by no means saying that we are some sort of green utopia where nothing ever happens. Clearly, we do have a problem with knife crime in this country, and every city has rough areas where things happen, and in bigger cities there is some gang problems. Now, I don't know the full background of this case, it's just happened tonight, but let's be honest, you don't hear about double fatal stabbings in Birmingham every week. That's not the case. Birmingham probably has about 30 murders a year, and it's a city of over 1 million people. So whilst that's sort of no comfort to the families of these two men, I do believe it's important to put things in context. We do have problems with knife crime in this country, and you know what? If I went out in the street and I was assaulted by some thug, I'd be angry, I'd be thinking, oh, crime's out of control. But we cannot allow sort of perception to cloud reality. If you happen to be part of the percentage that is being a victim of crime, then you're going to think it's high. And if you believe everything the tabloids say, and if you believe their sort of fear-mongering, then you will believe that crime in this country is out of control. I don't believe it is, actually. I really don't. I think we have certain inner city areas that are tough, and we do have a problem with certain types of crime, such as knife crime. And I also heard today about the woefully inadequate state of producing justice for victims of rape. So we have a lot of areas in the criminal justice system that's not good enough. But it really irritates me when people exaggerate and when they really don't know what they're talking about. And they say things like, oh, Britain's out of control, we're one of the worst places in the world, things like this. That's just abject rubbish. And I'm not saying that because of patriotism. I'm saying it because it's just a fact. We have knife problems in this country, there's no question about that, and that needs to be tirelessly tackled. But let's not exaggerate because of tragedies like this. Let's not just... That irritates me when people just follow the crowd and they just think they know about the situation. Now, I commented on that forum, and I pretty much suspect that I'm going to get lots of thumbs down because people don't like to hear the truth, but that is the truth. And they'll probably misinterpret it and think I'm being some cold bastard who, you know, like I say, it must be awful what the families of those men are going through. But we have to put things in context. 2 people have been murdered today in a city of 1.3 million. Think about that for a second. Now, if you consider the number of people in the UK who die in road accidents, which is actually low by European standards, that's a lot higher. The rate of suicides is higher than homicides in this country. And the number of people who die from smoking is a lot higher. Now, I know it's not the same because smoking is a personal habit, and murder is a terrible thing, but all I'm saying is it needs to be put in context, and the collective media has a responsibility to do this. So news, for example, that crime has significantly fallen in certain areas has to be promoted as much as, for example, when you have cases like this happening. They're both equally important. Now, I'm not saying the media shouldn't report crime, of course it should, but by the same token, they should be responsible and not stir up public fears, and I believe the tabloids certainly are doing that. I remember once seeing a newspaper where the front cover showed all these photographs of victims of muggings, and it was quite harrowing to see. And that wasn't embellished, that was actual crime photos, but what they were doing is taking out extreme cases and presenting that as the norm. And that's dangerous, it's irresponsible. And I'm sick and tired of people, frankly, talking about news events when they really don't know the background, or they'll just come out with sweeping statements like, things are terrible, I'm moving. And quite frankly, I'll probably sound snobbish here, but the average Tom, Dick, and Harry doesn't bother looking into the background of things. It's the same, and on if we want to look at the wider issue, people might look at wars in certain parts of the world and say, "Oh, the world's terrible, the world's going down." Actually, armed conflict is less than it was in the 1990s. That's a fact. It's just a fact. People never look at context, and that irritates me, because that's when you sow the seeds of ignorance, and with that comes a whole range of problems. So in conclusion, we have problems in this country. We have a knife problem in this country, and unfortunately these two men have paid with their lives. But that does not mean either Birmingham is a very dangerous city, because it absolutely is not, or the UK is a very dangerous country, because we are not. The chances of being murdered in this country are extremely low, and that's simply a fact. Okay, thanks for watching.